Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the latest edition of QTalks, the online on-demand series of conversations around the future of water powered by Qatium. My name is Tom Freyberg. I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water, and I'll be your host for the next 25 minutes. So today we're talking about something perhaps a little bit different to solutions or digital or AI or digital twins, and that is also one of the most important topics and challenges that I think that doesn't get enough airtime, and that is staffing and recruitment challenges. It's estimated, as a sort of do you know, that some water utilities are expected to lose up to 50% of their operational staff in the coming 15 years. So how do you attract skilled staff to take over and plug these gaps? What does a water workforce of the future look like? And how do you ensure that organizations are resilient to change culturally and internally? So we've got three, as usual, amazing speakers for you today to give different viewpoints. We've got Josh Newton, who is a global water consultant and also founder of the recruitment site, Josh's Water Jobs. We've got Ronja Sorensen, who is the IWA young professional from Denmark and also smart mobility consultant for Ramboll. And last but not least, we've got Mark Coates, who is a board member of the UK Industry Association, British Water. So Josh, Ronja and Mark, thanks for joining me and welcome to the latest edition of QTalks.
Thank you.
So I want to start with some kind of some context, if you will, and hopefully this won't be too sobering with the data. But Josh, that gap we talked about at the very beginning, there's this phrase that's been coined for it called the silver tsunami, really in relation to this tidal wave of imminent retirees that are due to hit the workforces and the potential gap they're going to leave. So you've seen some pretty compelling data from the US on side of things, haven't you, as well? So is it as bad as we think?
Yeah, no, it's very serious. The Brookings Institution did a study, I think it was in 2018, that reported that in the U.S., in the coming decades, we'll need 1.4 million new professionals in the water sector in the United States. And this is, it's primarily because of this silver tsunami, as you coined. That it's the baby boomers who are about to retire that are leaving this large gap, but then there's not the influx of younger professionals to kind of backfill because this area has seen less attraction to it in terms of working for the water and say sanitation sector. So yeah, in the US, it's 1.4 million, and we're seeing this in many other countries in the global north.
And obviously you mentioned the huge volumes of highly skilled, highly experienced operatives that are due to retire. That's a lot of knowledge that's potentially going to be lost from those organizations when you're talking 30, 40, even you hear about people with 5 decades worth of sector experience, right? So.
Yeah, it also creates an opportunity, though, for the changing skills that are in demand that with technology and other data and innovation that are coming into the sector, that the younger professionals that youth are more engaged in now. So yes, losing a huge amount of institutional memory and experience, but also an opportunity to really shift the sector in a new direction.
Absolutely. I like the optimistic kind of ending there. So Ronja, we've got lots to hear from you about, but obviously, can you give us a sort of perspective from how you see things? I guess you're outside of the water sector now in smart mobility, but obviously you still have one foot in with the IWA water chapter as well. So would you echo Josh's kind of reflections in the Danish water sector as well?
Yes, for sure. I think in Denmark, it's exactly the same that we see. And actually so much that a lot of companies are really looking also for international younger professionals and trying to attract these. That's been a bit difficult at the moment because the government is trying to cut down on international education, so that a lot of English-speaking educations are being cut down now, which is quite a problem because it will be really, there is a missing youth to take over these jobs. And I mean, yeah, in the transport sector, we're looking at the same thing. So I can definitely also feel it that there's a huge gap between the younger and then the more seniors, and the knowledge transfer isn't really happening organically. And I think there needs to be a push to actually ensure that this happens, as at the same time as not making some sort of a tokenism, check, we have a youth person on board, but also listening to exactly these new skills that youth might be bringing to the table.
Absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit about, I think, the differing roles and skills that a lot of young professionals are bringing to the table later on, and perhaps how the current jobs we have are perhaps too prescriptive and almost old-fashioned compared to where the workforce is as well. But I remember writing on this back in about 2018 around data centers, and actually this, whether it's water or mobility or even other industries, I think it's across the whole of the STEM-related businesses, science, technology, engineering, and maths, where there's a huge skill shortages. So actually the ability to look for professionals from other industries and bring them across is perhaps one way to fill that gap as well. Mark, you obviously wear a few different hats in the UK, from British Water to working for a software company as well. Are you optimistic about this situation in terms of the role that digital can play to help with that skill gap?
Absolutely. I think we can't downplay what has happened over the last 3 years with COVID and the issues it's caused. But the one positive that it has created is opened up the jobs market. People have got so used to working from home. The ability to work from home has been, I would politely put it, the world's biggest experiment. It's got people who've proved that they can do it. And with the adoption now, and the one thing that has really helped over the last 3 years because of this experiment is people have tried new ways of working, have accepted new ways of working, and that has opened up the job market. So people who maybe not considered working in the water industry 4, 5, 6 years ago, because there is now a greater freedom and flexibility, whether that be because of physical issues, financial issues, or mental issues, that relaxed atmosphere now gives them the ability to engage with the marketplace and fill some of the spaces that are required to keep the energy, keep the engine turning and people in work.
Absolutely. I guess the benefit of this decentralized digital push that was really forced as a result of the pandemic, that this kind of change that needed to happen, but as a lot of organizations had their hand forced, and now it seems to be the way that everything's going, is you're not limited to the geography of where the company's based, right? No. In terms to attract the right skilled individuals as well.
Definitely. I mean, you look at sort of, as you mentioned on your introduction, the digital twin, managing that asset now can be done remotely in a number of ways, from drones doing, Ron, you might sort of be aware there's been bridge management to pipeline management and surveys where you theoretically open up the manhole, drop a drone in, and 2-3 miles down the pipeline that another manhole is opened up and out the drone comes. That data can then be analysed, anywhere. So again, that skill set and that ability to include more and include others, that has really coming to the forefront. So there is a very strong positive, and one I'm very happy to be part of.
Very good. Good to hear. So in terms of the actual, because I guess this challenge that we're talking about is, I think it's well known. It perhaps doesn't get enough airtime as it should compared to other challenges in the industry, like creating resilient organizations to climate change. But that tends to talk about the infrastructure, not actually the team itself. So part of the solution, I guess, and it's a very nuanced challenge to sort of to simplify it to one solution, is actually the recruitment processes, right? It's actually looking at how we're recruiting the right skilled staff into those roles to make sure that they have a fruitful career. So Josh, you've done a lot of work on this, particularly with one of the many hats you wear with your recruitment side. How do you see how this can be improved, perhaps with some of the work you've done with the government in the US?
Yeah, it's one is starting early to make these types of thematic areas, say water, sanitation, get it on the radar of kids in middle school, get them interested in the subjects very early on. and let them know that there are jobs available in this space. I think another aspect of this is that there's a gender divide, there's a gender gap as well in the water sector, in that I think worldwide the figures are that only 17% of jobs worldwide, 17-18% are filled by women. So there's a huge source of talent there. And so it's about making workplaces, work environments, the benefits associated with jobs more attractive to women to apply to these positions as well, because that's a huge source that we're not utilizing. It's underutilized. So yeah, starting young, it's making it more attractive to women to work in. And yeah, it's how I often try to sell it is like, literally these jobs are like helping save the world. It's helping save people. You almost can use a hero complex to get people more involved in this sector, because it's so crucial for all aspects of society, environment, economics, development. So yeah, we need people to work in this sector.
I think I like the superhero analogy. I remember seeing something from the Institute of Civil Engineers, Mark, I don't know if you saw it, where they sort of took these figures of water history, like Joseph Bazalgette, the Victorian engineer, the mastermind behind the original sort of Thames-Sewer, and actually pumped him up with a cape, and it was almost like this superhero analogy of these icons in the water sector history. That was great to try and create awareness for other people. Ronja, in terms of the recruitment side, then, what have you sort of seen or recommendations from the job you're doing and what you're seeing in Denmark?
So I'm part of the Young Water Professionals Denmark, which is part of the IWA kind of chapters of networks, and I think that is really a great way also to get more both students and also working professionals to engage and be part of this network and learn more about what are actually the opportunities out there, and people also exactly finding out, okay, what does this job description actually mean? Is that actually something that I can apply for? And there's hope out there. I mean, the Danish Young Water Professional chapter is 90% female, and some great women in there who are doing some amazing work. But I do think it's really the case that we need to rethink how we advertise these jobs and what is it we're looking for. I mean, from personal experience, again, I would like to work in the water sector, but I think that it's also sometimes about what are the different positions that are needed. And so this, as you also say, the hero, the understanding water, this whole narrative around valuing water, I think is something that definitely interests me a lot, and that I don't see what job title I am applying for to work with that aspect. So there's something about how we promote these water jobs as well, I think.
So you think in terms of the current jobs that are available, they're almost too sort of boxed compared to the people like yourself. You speak multiple languages, you've worked across different countries, and actually the type of role you're looking for, you're saying that actually the jobs are a bit too limited in their description and what they're doing for someone like yourself, right?
And I also think that a lot of educations now are more multidisciplinary. So a lot of young people are not a hydrologist and that's it, but they maybe have interest in programming and they'd like to do more of that. And so also for organizational structures to acknowledge that and maybe, see young people more as contributing with different parts than being one specific role, I think that would also help. Again, also for myself to kind of get in there.
100%. I remember doing some work with a European utility on their sort of water demand reduction strategy, and actually they recruited sort of new people in terms of from a sort of psychology background to look at behavioral science and tried to understand different demographics and what would be the key drivers depending on the age, the wealth, where they're living, the geography, to reduce their water demand. And I thought that's actually a good example of where people are creating brand new jobs to appeal to people beyond traditional sort of hydraulic engineering. I thought that was a good example. But that was 2 or 3 people within an organization that serves, nearly 6 million people with water. So,
and I mean, I'm myself working in a consultancy company that has both a water department and a transport department. And I mean, let's just be honest, it isn't easy to bridge even internally, but I'm working on it. So
Mark, how do you see it? Because from an infrastructure point of view, Obviously, with the association works within water, but your sort of day job, you could say you look at different industries as a whole. Is there anything that other sectors are doing that shines, that sort of sticks out to you? I think this is one way that the water sector should adopt to try and attract new talent.
I mean, what Josh and Ronja said is sort of spot on. 100% agree. I mean, for myself, from a very personal perspective, I think we're engaging with students far too late in life. We should be engaging with them far, far sooner. And Josh said that's superhero. Water in the coming years, with the energy crisis that we've got, are going to face even more pressure. I mean, if there's a major influx into hydrogen for power, that's going to compete with water. So that's going to be put more pressure on the water system we have, and that. I think getting in front of, and too often, forgive this phrase, but too often students, and I'm talking 11, 12, 13, 14, those critical years where they're making up their mind of where they want to go, are heavily influenced. And the standard practice in, just so we say, construction, is to take them to a site that may be a housing estate or something similar, and they see the very skilled and very important trades that are working, but that's the one perspective that is given, which is a very narrow perspective. Not often are they taken to the design offices or where we, as you said, being a digital programmer, the new skills that are frightening emerging so quickly around things like HoloLens and headsets and all the metaverse and all that. We need to know that is now part and parcel of the construction industry and the water industry. So, something very similar I saw at the beginning of the year that wowed me was a simple pump had a QR code on it. There's nothing novel, new about that, but you went along with your mobile device and you scanned the QR code, and that QR code told you at the beginning what parts you needed. Did you have them? Check. The first step to do, which is isolate it, check. So not only was it digitizing the safety process, there was the underlying professionalism there, safety, health and safety to actually produce a job. There was an incentive that it wasn't someone turning up in overalls, a bag of spanners and some filters. It was more engaging in the role, and also it gives the ability to track and progress someone's career. If they have been through a digital record, being able to show they can attack a certain aspect over a year, where's their career prospects? Where can they go? And that digital apprenticeship, is not one that's only tools, it's one that can go on and progress over the next 30, 40, 50 years that they're in industry.
I think often, because both Josh and Ron, you said the same thing, it's for trying to sow the seed of the water sector that's a purpose-driven industry for younger children, right? To sort of see it as a potential. But often you need that genesis, that spark of inspiration to see something, to then actually start asking the questions and researching further. So I think, Mark, you mentioned by sort of digitizing a physical asset and showing the link to the digital world might be a one way to sort of drive that initial interest to people who may not have thought about water beforehand.
Definitely. I think the bit to add to that is, if you project here in the UK that Bentley's been heavily involved in the Thames Tideway, you can't see that. And that is comparable to a new underground system being placed in any metropolitan city. But people don't see it because it's deep and buried, but they don't get to use it. That's the problem. At least with a metro or MRT, you get to ride the train. You definitely don't want to sort of ride the sewers, but there is that sort of forgotten aspiration around the project.
It might be an interesting field trip for the school to get the paperwork signed off on that one. But it reminds me of visiting Singapore back in even 2010. I know as a utility and as an island, sort of a nation, it gets frequently quoted as somewhere of best practice. But even their sort of new water recycling plant that's quite interactive, they frequently do school trips to actually take and show children how wastewater is purified and recycled through to non-potable reuse. And it was really interesting. Sorry, indirect potable reuse. So it's really interesting to kind of see that's one way to sort of get that spark and that interest in the water sector to children from a younger age. Josh, I want to sort of come back to you on the recruitment side then, and the kind of some of the things you're seeing with perhaps traditional ways of recruitment, and the way those jobs are worded, perhaps with gender biases that where you're being brought in as a consultant to maybe help change and help transition, because I think that's really important here.
Yeah, so I was reading the other day that only 37% of job descriptions do not have gender bias in them.
Wow.
And wording is really, really important. And what's included in the job description is really important, because another figure that's used is that, for instance, again, bringing in the gender aspect, women typically will only apply to jobs where they are 100% have the qualifications, where men will apply to jobs with only 60% of the qualifications. So how do you change the wording that it becomes more attractive to a more inclusive, diverse body of people to apply to those jobs? So it's about shortening. Attention spans are really long. I see job descriptions that have 3,000 words in them. People just don't have the attention span to even get through a job description advertisement. Job titles to make them more attractive. There's a lot that can be done just on the posting, the advertising itself, to make it a more attractive job, a more attractive workplace, tell more about the geography that you'll be living and working in. There's a lot of things that you can use to entice people to apply for a position.
Do you think, following on from that actually it also comes down to communication? If the organizations that are looking to recruit, their outward-facing communication on social media, on their websites, it might not reflect some of the innovative things they're doing, or even they might have a really strong mission and purpose and vision, but actually their outward-facing communication is pretty dull. So when people naturally Google and search for that organization on social and they don't really see anything, they think, well, this isn't really the type of place I want to work at.
Yeah, totally. You're talking, especially if you're trying to attract younger generation, they view job postings, social media, completely different than older generations do. So if you're wanting to attract that type of audience to your jobs, you have to make that more applicable to what they're interested in, how they view material, how they communicate. So organizations are lagging behind those areas.
Well, it's a data point, isn't it? I think when people research the organization that's recruiting the role, they'll look at the social media, they'll look at the tone of voice, they'll used to look at like Glassdoor for reviews, but actually we help a lot of sort of startup tech companies on that exact external facing messaging. So when they're recruiting, it actually looks, the communication reflects exactly what the organization is doing. So
but also the sustainability aspect of it. So I think like a lot of young people now are saying we want to work in a company that actually makes a difference. And what is the sustainability strategy? But also, where's the greenwash in that? Where's the actual work? I feel like young people are quite critical as well and don't want to just hear, we do a lot of good stuff. They want to see it. And I think that's also somewhere where companies really have to step up and show the real deal, what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Organizations can't just kind of mention the word ESG on the website and expect that to pull the wool over young professionals' eyes, right? It actually needs a genuine sort of sustainability strategy in place. Mark, I think you wanted to sort of row in on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I've been doing a lot of papers and research recently for both British Water and for the Institute of Chartered Engineers, and actually the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transport, Ronja, on mobility. And there was all about leadership. And that leadership, what was deemed as, how can I put it politely, must improve and can improve, was the soft comms aspect of communicating the value of not only of the project. So often this day and age, because there's money sort of involved in projects, we communicate the value of the project, but we don't communicate the value of the people and the roles that they do with inside that project, and the sort of aftermath, so to speak, of when the construction site's finished. And that as you all three of you just briefly discussed, that's the thing. That's being able to communicate, at a level that most people understand, not on an academic level or an equation level, of the reality of the role, responsibility, and the deliveries of such an important industry. It is critical to its future.
I think it's often looking to the outcome of what that project or the impact will have. You mentioned the tideway, right? So in terms of actually if you're traveling into the future when that is in operation, what does that look like? And how can you help contribute towards creating that kind of future as opposed to the nuts and bolts of the project itself, right? So, guys, unfortunately, that we are literally on the money there for 25 minutes. These are designed to be sort of bite-sized discussions to watch and view and digest during coffee breaks. So I know it's one we could have carried on much further. So I want to thank you, Josh, Ronja, and Mark, for your input on this latest QTalks. And I think that the timing of this coming out just after the World Water Week in New York is really good timing as well, given the global focus on meeting the water challenges, especially SDG 6. So thank you for tuning in to the latest QTalks, and please remember to share, and engage with the content going forward. Thank you.